Alright, we're gonna see if we can do this with no mistakes. That way I don't have to edit it. I have here Maxie, who's an essential part of any good recording, is a lapdog. Alright. His name was Bob, by Llewellyn. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Chapter 13 and a half. Gabby's point of view bonus mini chapter. Gabby's point of view. Gabby. That was his name. He was a biddy. Jeff gave him this name. Jeff was his human. Bro. That was his human's brother. Sometimes Bro went by another name too. Cujo was Bro's biddy. Everyone loved Gabby, except Cujo. Cujo didn't seem to like anyone. That was okay. Gabby was good. Cujo was good. Bro sometimes joked about sending Cujo away. Gabby didn't like that joke. It was a lie, and lying was bad. Bro was good and shouldn't lie. Cujo was smart. That was his talent. He was good at escaping. Bro was not happy about that. Cujo was. Cujo was proud but reckless. Gabby said small words. Small words were his talent. He also understood the big words. Gabby was proud of his talents. Saying the big words took a lot of energy. Gabby had never tried. That was okay. Jeff was happy when Gabby said small words. Jeff liked Gabby. Gabby was happy. One day, Gabby, Jeff, Cujo, and Bro went to the park. They met a human there with another biddy. This biddy shone brightly. His name was Bob. His owner saw him. His owner looked at Gabby and Cujo and saw them too. Gabby was surprised. He didn't know humans could see him. The other human was angry Jeff and Bro couldn't see biddies, but seeing was not a talent of Jeff and Bro. Gabby didn't want this human to be angry. Jeff was good. Bro was good. The other human was good. Gabby wanted them to be friends. Bob's talents were being smart and understanding and saying the big words. That was a lot of talents. Jeff was surprised. Bro wanted to own Bob. The other human and Bob were angry and left. Sometimes making friends was hard. Jeff and Bro were still talking about Bob, who could make the big words. Gabby wanted Jeff to be impressed with Gabby. Gabby could learn new talents. So Gabby took a deep breath, concentrated hard, and said, "Jeff happy, Gabby big words too?" Is that a good voice? I'm not sure if that's a good voice for him. Thankfully he doesn't talk very much. He did it! Gabby was proud of himself. But Jeff and Bro stopped talking. They were looking at Gabby. Cujo quietly slipped his leash. The brothers were looking like they were maybe trying to see Gabby. Gabby was surprised. Maybe they wanted to learn new talents too? Alright. I need to change. Hold up. Change this real quick. Now in 14, I'm a professional. Voila. Okay. Chapter 14. Snow. Fair warning, this chapter's sad. So, it's sad, y'all. Heads up. Maxie, you ready? It's sad. Ready for this? Yeah. Over the next few weeks, between working and when Bob wasn't looking, you studied up on biddies. You figured you really didn't know a whole lot about them, and probably should. Unfortunately, most sources agreed that they weren't technically living. They're not made up of cells, besides their bones, and were mostly made of soul energy. They didn't grow. They didn't reproduce. They also widely fluctuated in temperature depending on their moods. You had noticed that at certain times, Bob could feel really warm. Like that time you told him he looked handsome in that yellow and black jacket with the fluffy trim you had bought him online. Haha, so weird. I think we all know what that jacket looks like. As far as understanding went, well, you'd been a little wrong about all biddies understanding everything people said. seemed biddies had varying degrees of intelligence. Bob was probably at the higher end of the spectrum, as far as speech and intelligence went, though there were reports of other biddies that couldn't speak but were very intelligent, and could certainly find their own methods of communication. And those that could speak very well, but were more simple... and those that could speak very well, but were more simple and childlike. Moving on. Bob, meanwhile, seemed to be settling in great. You had gotten him his emergency phone, just in case the internet went out. One of those disposable phones with the prepaid minutes. Better than nothing. Though, so far, communicating via the computer seemed to be working just fine. You had even managed to saw a small rectangle at the bottom of your front door and fashioned it with a sort of doggy door that could be locked from the inside. That way, Bob could get out if he needed to, though you were pretty sure you could kiss your deposit goodbye after that. I've had similar experiences. Determined to be self-sufficient, Bob had designed a system of pulleys that he could use to open and close cupboards, and you installed them. The fridge and freezer were still posing a problem. Though a small lunchbox and ice packs worked for the day, Bob seemed slightly irked he still had to rely on you to fill the box. Bob actually got better at cleaning and kept the apartment relatively tidy. It seemed he really did feel the need to be helpful or useful or whatever. You could tell it really bothered him that you worked and paid for everything. You once joked about being his sugar roomie. And he really didn't find that funny. In fact, he had stayed on top of the fridge and wouldn't talk to you for almost a whole day afterward. You were more careful with your jokes after that. Bob could be really sensitive. Okay, so you maybe got mad at him too sometimes. Like the time you came home to find the shattered remains of your favorite mug in the trash, followed by a stuttered apology. You might have locked him out of your room and ignored him for a few hours afterwards. Work was as hectic as it usually was during the summer months. Dr. Rivera eased up a bit on the no Bob rule, and Bob was allowed to come to the hospital a few days a week, if he stayed in the back, out of sight of the clients. Bob and Gary were starting to get along. Seemed they shared a love of random internet memes, and you even caught them laughing together over things a few times. Who the heck was dat boy? Leave it to Gary to finally win Bob over. He could win over just about anyone. Dr. Rivera and Bob, you were pretty sure they'd never get along. The most those two would share were suspicious looks and distance. Mary, the receptionist, and Bob were indifferent toward each other. Mary was indifferent towards most people. You and Bob settled into a routine. When you got home from work, you'd either watch some anime or some cheesy sci-fi flick on TV, or play video games. Bob got surprisingly good at fighting games, or maybe you were just really bad at them. I feel that. I'm so bad at games. And he about rivaled you in competitiveness. It was actually quite hilarious to watch him stretch and lean to reach the buttons. But man, he was seriously salty when he lost. He'd go to work with you at least once a week or more if it was stormy out. He really hated storms, but was getting better about not completely freaking out. Though he'd still sneak in to sleep on your pillow whenever it stormed, and you'd still pretend not to notice, even when he'd reach over to wrap his arms around one of your fingers. And yeah, maybe you conveniently slept with your hand on your pillow during storm nights. That was so cute. You nodded, time has passed. You nodded again at the client in front of you as she talked and pet a very perturbed cat who was staring you down while flicking his tail.
And I named him Mr. Fluffers after the late Mr. Fluffers who passed away over a year ago because he reminded me of him, but their personalities are completely different.
You know what? That voice was a choice, and I'm sticking to it. The woman looked at you. You nodded again, opening your mouth to ask how long he had been scratching his ears. But the woman continued.
Though the late Mr. Fluffers would flick his right ear back when upset, and this Mr. Fluffers flicks his left ear back, and I think he may shed a little more.
You nodded again, wondering if your head could conceivably fall off if you kept nodding. This appointment was going nowhere fast. The woman would not stop talking, and all of this information was meaningless. You just needed to know how long Mr. Fluffers had been shaking his head and scratching his ears. Then you could run an ear cytology. Dr. Rivera could prescribe some ear cleaner and meds and send them on their merry way. But no, you had to hear Mr. Fluffer's entire life story first, and there was no polite way to really steer the conversation in the right direction. You had tried. Twice. Finally, after hearing about the different kinds of sweaters Mr. Fluffer liked to wear, Mr. Fluffers, I'm so sorry I mispronounced it, Mr. Fluffers liked to wear, and a bit about the client's own health problems, you got the information you needed and were able to enter in your history. Dr. Rivera still wasn't out of room 2, and he was already 30 minutes behind schedule. Today was going to be one of those days. The phones were ringing off the hook to the point where both Mary and Gary could not keep up with them. You could barely keep up with the rooms, what with having to help answer the phones, get histories, assist Dr. Rivera, and clean up pee in the front lobby because an intact male chihuahua decided to mark every vertical surface while the owner played on her phone, oblivious. You knocked on the door of room 2, asking if Dr. Rivera needed help. He motioned you away as he continued his "your pet needs a dental cleaning" speech. You wouldn't doubt that dog needed her teeth cleaned. You could smell her breath from where you were standing. Poor dog. Brush your dog's teeth, y'all. They make dog toothpaste, and you can use a human toothbrush, and you do that once every couple days, and you won't have to take your dogs in for dental cleaning. Save you money, and save the dog the hassle, and I'm sorry I've taken 10 seconds for a pet PSA. Poor dog. But you knew Mr. Fluffers would take a while, what with the chatty owner, and you still had another client waiting in the lobby. Ugh, you really needed to get that chihuahua into a room. Chihuahuas are 80% bladder by volume, I can tell you in my personal experience. Hey, could you... Oh, Mary. Hey, could you come up front for a sec? Mary leaned in the doorway, calling to you. Aw, man, what now? Waiting at the front desk was an older woman holding up her cell phone to you. Ah, you recognized this woman as one of your regular clients. You approached and squinted at what looked like a blurry picture of a red splotch on a gray background.
I think Brutus has been scratching at his skin again. Does this look infected to you? Should I bring him in?
She asked. God, you had no idea what you were even looking at. You were getting ready to tell her that if she was worried, she should schedule Brutus to come in, when someone literally burst through the front doors, frantic and cradling something in his hands. This part is sad, so just FYI, if you're, you don't want to hear something sad, don't watch this. He locked eyes with you, recognition lighting up his panicked, sweaty face. You! I know you! Please, you've got to help him! He got away, and the cat... Please help him! He yelled, thrusting the creature in his hands toward you. You recognized the man as one of the twins you had met at the park a few weeks back. Then, in his hands... Cujo. Shit! You grabbed the biddy from him, rushing to the back. He was in a bad way. His shirt was in tatters, and you could see he also had several missing ribs and a large puncture in his skull. A red smoke seemed to be seeping out of the open holes. His whole body felt cold. Dr. Rivera was coming out of the room as you rushed past, saying, "Treatment! Emergency! Now! Treatment now! Emergency!" Shit, you needed to calm down. Remember your training. Think. Dr. Rivera rushed over as you set the biddy on the table, cutting away his clothes and grabbing gauze to try to hold it over the wounds. The red smoke kept leaking out around the gauze, no matter how you pressed it to the cracked bones and open holes. The smoke dissipated into this fine, white, powdery substance as soon as it hit the gauze. Cujo's eye sockets were shut tightly, and his face was scrunched in pain. This wasn't working. It wasn't working! Stay calm. Dr. Rivera froze beside you. No, I don't deal with these things. They're not even alive, he started. Don't you dare! Please, help me! You pleaded, trying your hardest to keep what looked like the biddy's soul from leaking out. Fine, damn it! He rushed over to the surgery area, quickly returning with the bone putty. Here, hold him down! He barked at you as he gloved up and opened a packet, scooping some of the Play-Doh-like substance out. You held Cujo still as Dr. Rivera stuffed the putty into the open parts of the biddy's ribs, and, yes, it seemed to be stopping the soul from bleeding out. Cujo was taking quick, uneven breaths. As Dr. Rivera applied the bone putty to the last puncture wound in Cujo's skull, the biddy took a few final, shuddering breaths and then stopped breathing completely. You both watched him, waiting for something. He wasn't bleeding anymore. Shouldn't he be stabilized? But he wasn't breathing. You reached out to touch him and jumped as almost instantly he dissolved into dust. Just dust and a small, metal, rice-like object. You stared at the pile of dust, shocked. There was dust on your fingers, too. It was cold and fine, like snow. You were still standing with your hand hovering over the pile of dust, with dust on your fingers. Just dust. It had happened so fast. Dr. Rivera slowly reached over into the pile of dust to pick up the metal object, studying it. Microchip, he said quietly. You both continued to stare at the pile of dust. You thought about the angry, muzzled biddy the dust used to be, his expression so much like Bob's. You dropped your hand, trying to wipe the stuff from your fingers as you stared at the pile of dust. It wouldn't wipe off. Mary walked through the doorway, and both you and Dr. Rivera quickly peeled your eyes away from the dust pile to look at her. "Oh," she said, as you both turned to stare at her, and she noticed what remained of the biddy. She winced. "So, I had Cujo's owner filling out paperwork. Should I get him into room 2? Yeah. Dr. Rivera cleared his throat. Yeah, do that. Thanks, Mary. She left, and Dr. Rivera gently placed the microchip back in the pile of dust. It rolled, creating a straight little path in the pile. Had you been too slow? What if you had grabbed the bone putty right away? Would Cujo be alive right now if you had done something different? Been faster? He had been so lively just a few weeks ago, laughing when you told off Chuck and his brother. I have to go talk to its owner. I should probably go find out the owner's name. Chuck, you said. His name is Chuck. Oh, okay. Well, he cleared his throat again, took off his glasses, cleaned them, and put them back on. Well, if you could, we should package up the remains, in case Chuck wants them. You do that. I'll go talk to him. Okay, you said, still staring at the dust. It happened so fast. Why couldn't you have saved him? Dr. Rivera called your name, breaking you from your stupor. You okay? He asked. Need a moment? No, I'm fine. You shook your head, rubbing at your face with the hand not covered in dust. I've got this. You okay? Yeah, these things happen sometimes. We tried our best. Just sometimes we tried our best. Yeah. He took off his glasses again and cleaned them before replacing them again, then slowly made his way over to room 2. You carefully scooped Cujo's remains and microchip into one of the plastic pill vials you had. You couldn't think of anything else to use. You wish you had something more appropriate to use. Putting his remains in something like that felt wrong. But there was nothing else. Should you put what remained of his clothes in there too? that didn't seem right either. Afterward, you washed your hands. It still felt like there were fine particles of dust on your fingers, no matter how much soap you used and how hard you scrubbed them. Mr. Fluffer's owner was peeking out through the door of room 1, impatience in her tone as she asked,
"Excuse me, is the doctor going to be much longer?"
"I'm sorry for the wait," you said, drying your hands. He had to deal with an emergency. He should be in shortly." She scoffed.
"Shortly? That's what you said last time. Anyway, could you bring Mr. Fluffers a bowl of water? He's thirsty."
"Of course," you said. And you brought it. There was crying coming from the room next door. Huh. At least Chuck really did seem to care about Cujo after all. He brought him to a vet, a place for living things.
"Well, that doesn't sound very good,"
Mr. Fluffer's owner said to you, lowering her voice and looking concerned.
"What's going on over there?"
"Someone lost their friend," you said, not wanting to go into detail. You had kept it together so far. No crying. Doing good.
"Oh my, that's so sad. Oh, I forgot to ask, when the doctor comes in, can we get Mr. Fluffer's nails cut too?"
You nodded, offering her a weak smile while swallowing the lump in your throat, maintaining your professional persona. You never got to see Chuck before he left with Cujo's remains. That was probably for the best. You don't know what you could have possibly said to him. You didn't even really know him or Cujo. Somehow, you all caught up on all the appointments by the end of the day. As always, you seamlessly moved from the sad appointments to the happier ones, while shifting your emotions as was appropriate to each situation. Always remaining professional, doing good. You were numb and tired when you got home later that evening. You doing okay, Maxie? I know it's very sad. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. He's like, "I don't care, let me sleep." You were numb and tired when you got home later that evening. Luckily, you had remembered to message Bob and let him know you were running late, so he didn't worry. He met you at the door, looking nervous and all kinds of guilty. Welcome home, Tiny," he greeted, barely meeting your eyes and sweating nervously. "I, may have sort of broken one of the lamps. I know I said I'd work on my, issue, but it was just sitting there at the end of the table and... Wait, I'm sorry, You had scooped him up and were hugging him against your shoulder with your cheek resting against the top of his skull. He trailed off. You just had to hold him for a while. Feel him breathe. Feel him awkwardly reach up and pat at your face. Alive, solid, warm, not dust. You took a breath and let it out, lowering Bob back to the floor as you smiled at his dumbfounded and slightly red face. "Just happy to see you, that's all," you offered as an explanation. "Okay," he said as he scratched the back of his skull. You okay?" "Yeah, just bad day. Bad day. I'm going to bed early." You stepped over him, heading to your room. "Good night, Bob," you said over your shoulder. "Night," he called back as he remained standing where you had left him. You wrote a few sentences in your journal before changing and getting into bed. Bob didn't try to come into your room, probably sensing your need for some space. When you finally turned off the light and got under the covers, you let yourself cry silently into your pillow. You cried until you fell asleep. Alright, that was very sad. Very sad. This is a fantastic fanfic. It's one of my favorites. It's so well written and the story's fantastic. Alright, Maxie, I'm gonna exploit you for views. You're cute. You ready to be exploited for views? If you don't subscribe, you'll make Maxie very sad. So, look how sad he is. He's so sad you haven't subscribed and turned on notifications. Save the puppy. Make him happy. Subscribe. It's okay, Maxie. It's okay. We'll get more subscribers. Don't worry. We'll get more subscribers.